The spring sun of Abilene beat through the windows of my house, making dust specks dance in the air. I sat in my worn leather chair with a cup of strong coffee, watching a neighbor boy trying to learn a new trick on his skateboard. 76 years old is not the age to be jealous of such entertainment, but something about his persistence made me smile. My name is Russell Thornley. I've worked my whole life as a water engineer for the Abilene Water Department. It's not the most glamorous job, but it's stable and rewarding. People rarely think about the people who keep clean water in their taps until it's gone. However, I have survived 3 major floods and 2 major droughts in my career, so some of the old-timers in town remember me from those days. This house was once full of life. Margaret, my late wife, loved to have guests. She always said that a house without guests is like a reservoir without water. The structure is there, but there's no point. 5 years ago, cancer took her in a matter of 3 months, quickly and ruthlessly. After 48 years of marriage, I was alone in the house we'd bought when we were young. I took a sip of coffee and grimaced. It was cold. I got up and went to the kitchen to heat it up. My house wasn't exactly luxurious, a 1-story, 4-bedroom, living room, kitchen, and a small office. But it's fully paid off, located in a nice neighborhood in Abilene, and the value of such houses has increased several times in the last 20 years. The 10-acre plot with fruit trees and vegetable garden only adds to the value. I was putting a cup in the microwave when the phone rang. Seeing my daughter's name on the screen, I sighed and hit the answer button. "Good morning, Haley." "Daddy, did you forget again?" There was the usual irritation in my daughter's voice. "What was it?" "It's Warren's birthday today. We're expecting you at 6 p.m. I told you about it last week. I really forgot. Or maybe I pushed it out of my mind so I wouldn't have to think about an upcoming awkward evening with a son-in-law I can barely stand." Of course I remembered. "I'll be there at 6, I lied. "And don't be late like you were last time," she added in the tone one would use with a cranky child. After the short conversation, I returned to my now twice-cold coffee and thought, when had my relationship with my daughter become so strained? After Margaret's death? No, even before that. Probably when Haley married Warren 29 years ago. I'd never liked him, smug, with an exaggerated opinion of his talents and a perpetually condescending smile. Margaret used to say I was picking on him, that he was just trying to impress. But the years showed that my intuition had not failed me. I remember how everything changed after the birth of their firstborn, Elliot. Haley and Warren began to visit less often, citing busyness. Margaret traveled a lot on her own to help with the baby. I'm not good at imposing. As it happened, the distance between us was growing. My gaze fell on a framed photo of Haley on her college graduation day, radiant and hopeful. I'd been proud of her then. Now her life revolved around selling real estate and maintaining the image of a successful family, and she seems to view me as just another object to be managed. By 3 p.m., I packed up and drove to the mall to pick up a gift for Warren. What do you give a man who doesn't care about you? I settled on an expensive whiskey, corny, but a win-win. At the store, I ran into Judy Parker, my neighbor, who lives 2 doors down. "Russell, haven't seen you in ages. How you doing?" "I'm hanging in there, Judy. How are you?" Grandkids are here for a week. I'm taking them shopping." She nodded toward 2 teenagers looking at electronics. "By the way, I saw your Haley the other day. She was looking at the Thompson house that's for sale." "Yeah, she's in real estate." "No, she was looking at it with some older gentleman. Showed him your house through the fence. I thought maybe you were thinking of selling. I felt like I'd been splashed with cold water. Haley showed my house to a potential buyer without saying a word to me? You must be mistaken, Judy. I'm not going to sell the house." We said our goodbyes, but her words kept me on my toes all the way to Haley and Warren's house. Their 2-story house in a newer part of town always seemed faceless to me, just like dozens of other houses in the neighborhood. As I pulled up, I noticed a few parked cars, so there would be other guests. At 6 sharp, I rang the doorbell, holding a gift bag. Flora, my granddaughter, opened the door. Tall, slender, with her hair in a casual bun, she looked so much like a young Margaret that it sometimes took my breath away. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, giving me a peck on the cheek and taking the bag. Everyone was already gathered. There were 10 people in the living room, a few of Warren's colleagues, a couple of neighbors, and some people I didn't know. Warren was accepting congratulations, standing by the fireplace with a glass in his hand. When he saw me, he nodded, but made no attempt to approach me. "Dad, finally!" Haley came up to me, holding a glass of wine. "We thought you were going to be late again." I said I'd be here by 6 o'clock. "Yeah, but, never mind. Meet the Glovers. They've just moved into our street." The next hour passed in polite small talk. I sat in the corner watching my daughter's family in their natural environment. Warren was the center of attention as always, laughing loudly and telling stories about his successes at work. Haley fluttered between guests, the perfect hostess with the perfect smile. Elliot, my grandson, a tall young man with a perpetually tired look, sat tucked away on his phone. At one point, the conversation turned to real estate. "The market is crazy right now," Haley said. "Houses in older neighborhoods are going for double the price, especially if the lot is nice." "Your dad has one of those houses, right?" one of the guests asked. I looked up. "Oh, yeah." Haley gave me a quick glance. "Great house, great location, but it's getting hard for one person to maintain." "It's not hard on me," I countered. "Dad, you know what I mean. A house this big needs constant upkeep, and you already—" She paused. "You're not 20 years old. I'm 76, and I'm doing just fine." There was an awkward pause. Warren hurried to change the subject, but I saw him and Haley exchange glances. Later, when most of the guests had gone, we sat around the table. Me, Haley, Warren, and the grandkids. Elliot was still engrossed in his phone. "How are things going at work, Elliot?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Fine," he answered without looking up. "He got a promotion last month," Haley said proudly. "Now he's in charge of the whole development team." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "I always knew you had a bright mind." Elliot finally got off the phone and looked at me in mild surprise, as if he'd just noticed my presence. "Thanks, Grandpa. By the way, are you still using that ancient computer?" "It's handling what I need it to handle." "I could help you pick out something newer," he offered. "I'll come by sometime this weekend." "That would be great," I said, even though I knew he wouldn't come. He'd been to my place only once in the last year, and then only in passing to drop off some documents at his mother's request. Flora, unlike her brother, had always been more attentive to me. Now she sat beside me and asked about my affairs, about the garden, about the books I was reading. There was something of Margaret about her, not just her looks, but her inner warmth. "Grandpa, you have to show me your old pictures from work that you told me about last time," she said. "Sure, drop by whenever you want." "Flora, you have enough to do before your internship," Haley interjected. "Don't tire Grandpa out." "I won't," I countered. "I like her company." "Dad, we all understand that you're lonely," Haley said in a tone that was supposed to sound caring, but instead was condescending. "But young people have their own lives, their own plans. I'm not holding anyone back. I'm just glad when the grandchildren show an interest in family history." Warren chuckled. "Stories about plumbing? I'm not sure that's the most exciting legacy." I swallowed the curt reply. No sense in spoiling the evening further. "By the way, Dad," Haley pitched forward, "I've been meaning to talk to you. Have you been thinking about moving to a smaller place for a while? It's a great time to sell. Prices are at their peak. This is it. The conversation I've been waiting to have since I met Judy. I'm not going to sell the house, Haley, but think about it. Less cleaning, less gardening, a modern layout. There are great senior complexes with pools, medical care. I don't want to live in a senior complex. I want to stay in my house." Dad, be reasonable. It's getting hard for you to take care of him. Says who? I'm doing just fine. We can all see that the house is in need of repair. The porch is sagging, the fence is askew, and the garden looks neglected. I started to get angry that she was talking about it in front of everyone, as if she was making me look like an incapable old man. If you're so concerned about the state of my house, maybe you should offer to help more often instead of judging. Warren intervened, his tone conciliatory, but his words were not. Russell, we're just concerned about you. At your age, a fall could turn into serious problems. And in a house like this, there's a lot of dangers. Stairs to the attic, thresholds between rooms. I've lived in this house for 48 years and I know every corner of it. Don't talk to me like I'm senile. Nobody says that, Haley sighed. We just want you to be safe. I looked at her more closely. Behind the mask of concern, I saw impatience and calculation. Judy wasn't wrong. They were already planning the sale of my house. The evening ended tautly. Warren was unhappy that I'd ruined the party atmosphere. Haley smiled tensely as he saw off the last guests. Flora hugged me goodbye and whispered, "Don't be mad at your mom, she's really worried." Elliot just nodded, not looking away from the phone. At home, I sat in the dark for a long time, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Margaret on our wedding day, Haley at her high school graduation, grandchildren as children, family that seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving only shells of people with whom only papers connect me. The next morning, I called my old friend and colleague, Levi Harrison, who had moved to a neighboring town after retiring. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year, though we called regularly. "Levi, how would you like me to come down for a couple days? We got a lot to talk about." "Russell, sure, come on down. You know my door is always open to you." After talking to Levi, I started packing a small bag for the trip. As I was packing, I noticed that Haley had sent a text. "Dad, I found a great apartment for you. I want to show it to you the other day. Let me know when you're free." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled a folder from the safe with the deed to the house and other important papers. Everything was in order. I owned the house outright. The will had been drawn up while Margaret was still alive and hadn't been changed. But perhaps it was time to make adjustments. Around noon, the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was Haley. "Dad," I called, but you didn't answer. "I've been busy packing." She noticed the bag in the hallway and frowned. "Are you going somewhere?" "To Levi's for a few days." "Levi's? To Rainer Springs?" Her tone was full of incredulity. "You should warn us about plans like that." "I'm an adult, Haley. I don't need to ask anyone's permission." "It's not about permission, it's about worry. Is it safe for you to drive that far?" 90 minutes is not that far." She entered the house uninvited and began to survey the living room with a critical eye. "There's so much stuff in here that you don't use, Daddy. Maybe it's time for an audit." I followed her gaze. She was looking at the collection of old hydrology books I'd collected over the years, at the antique wall clock given to Margaret for our 20th anniversary, at the paintings by local artists we bought together. "All of these things have value to me, Haley, but they take up so much space, and they collect dust." I noticed the way she looked at the size of the room as if estimating square footage. "When are you coming back from Levi's?" she asked, changing the subject. "I'd like to show you that apartment on Sunday." "I don't know exactly. I might be a week late." Her face expressed displeasure, but she held back. "All right, but call me when you get back. And be careful driving." After she left, I felt strangely uneasy. Something in her demeanor, in the way she studied the house, was unsettling. I decided to take extra precautions. I gathered the most important documents, a few valuables, and Margaret's photographs to take with me. The rest would have to be left to fate. Before leaving, I called my neighbor Judy. "Judy, I'm going away for a few days to a friend's house. Can you keep an eye on the house?" "Sure, Russell. Don't worry, I'll notice if anything's wrong." With those words, I locked up the house, got into my old but reliable Ford and drove to Levi's, thinking that it might be time to make some serious decisions about my future and my relationship with my family. The drive to Rainier Springs wasn't too busy on this weekday. I drove at a leisurely pace, enjoying the views of the Texas countryside, the rolling plains dotted with wildflowers, the sprawling oaks standing alone. Spring had been unusually bountiful this year. Margaret loved this kind of weather. Every year at this time we went on picnics in the country and photographed the flowers for her scrapbook. Now I traveled alone, and the photos became increasingly rare. It's strange how many things lose meaning when there's no one to share them with. Levi met me in the driveway of his neat one-story house. In his 78 years he was still strong and trim, though his hair had turned gray and wrinkles crinkled his once smooth face. But his eyes, the clear blue eyes of an engineer accustomed to precise calculations, remained the same. "Russell, old boy." He gave me a big hug. "I'm so glad to see you. Come on in. I've just made lunch." The house smelled delicious, smelling of stewed meat and spices. On the kitchen table were 2 plates, a bottle of good whiskey, and fresh bread. "After Edna died, I started cooking on my own," Levi explained, noticing my surprised look. "Turns out I like it. Sit down and tell me how you're doing." Over lunch, I told him about my suspicions about Haley and her plans for my house. Levi listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions but not interrupting. That's what I'd been missing, a man who actually listened, not waiting for a pause to insert his opinion. "Do you think they might do something while you're gone?" he finally asked. I don't. I don't want to believe that Haley is capable of doing something like that, but I hesitated. "But you see the way she looks at your house," Levi finished for me. "I get it. My youngest was always squinting at my rare coin collection, too. After Edna died, she implied that Daddy's having a hard time taking care of them." Coins, can you imagine? We both grinned. There was something comforting in the fact that I wasn't the only one facing such problems. After lunch, Levi showed me around his property, a small but manicured rose garden, a garage where he had set up a workshop, and a guest room where I was to stay. Everything was simple but neat and functional. A real engineer's home. "I moved here when I realized I didn't need a big house in Abilene," Levy said. "But it was my decision, Russell. I made it myself. I chose this place. I decided what I wanted to bring with me. It's important to stay in control of your life." In the evening, we sat on the veranda, sipping whiskey and watching the sunset. The conversation flowed smoothly from memories of work to discussions of politics, from stories about grandchildren to reflections on life. At one point, I caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time, I felt normal. Not a lonely old man tolerated out of politeness, but just someone whose opinion mattered, whose experience was valuable, whose company was enjoyable. "You know, Russell," Levi said thoughtfully, "you and I didn't just survive in this world. We've built a part of it. Every time someone in Abilene opens a faucet and clean water flows from it, it's to our credit. Every time it rains hard but the city doesn't flood, it's because we designed the drainage system correctly. None of these youngsters, with their gadgets and new ideas, realize how much work is put into something they take for granted." I nodded, feeling a lump come up to my throat. Levi had expressed something I'd often thought about but couldn't articulate. We sat on the veranda until the cool breeze forced us to move into the house. As I fell asleep in the cozy guest room, I felt a strange calmness. Whatever awaited me at home, I knew I was not alone. The morning greeted us with bright sunshine and chirping birds. Levi, it turns out, was an early bird. When I went into the kitchen, he had already made breakfast and was reading the newspaper. "Any plans for today?" he asked, pouring me a cup of coffee. "Not much. Why don't we go to that lake you were talking about? See the new dam?" Levi brightened up. Despite his retirement, he was still interested in professional matters and regularly traveled to inspect the hydraulic structures in the county. The day was spent traveling and talking. We toured the new dam built to replace the old one, still of our design. We stopped by the local university where Levi sometimes lectured to hydrology students. We stopped at a small restaurant that served excellent steaks. Everywhere Levi was greeted with respect and warmth. Professor Harrison, Mr. Harrison, our hydrology guru. That's how people addressed him. You're a real celebrity around here, I remarked as we drove home. I just don't stop taking an interest in things, Levi shrugged. I go to town meetings, give lectures, counsel young professionals. People appreciate it when you share your experience, not just keep it to yourself. It got me thinking. Maybe that was my mistake. After retirement, I withdrew into my home, into my memories. Didn't seek out new contacts, didn't offer my expertise. No wonder I had become a burden to Haley and her family, an old man just occupying valuable real estate. That evening, sitting in Levi's living room, I ventured to call home to see if everything was okay. Strangely, I had a hunch that something was wrong. I dialed my number and there was no answer. I tried my neighbor Judy, no answer. I didn't call Haley because I didn't want her to know I was worried. That night, I had a strange dream. I came home, but I couldn't get in. The door wouldn't open with my key. I knocked and called, but no one answered. Then Haley's face appeared in the window looking at me with the same condescending smile she used to say, "Daddy, did you forget again?" I woke up in a cold sweat. At breakfast that morning, I told Levi that I'd probably go back to Abilene a day early. "Did something happen?" he asked, looking at me carefully. "I don't know. Just a feeling." I couldn't finish the sentence. "An engineer's intuition," Levi nodded. "I know what you mean. When a dam is about to leak, you can feel it, even if all the gauges show normal." I pulled myself together quickly, but without haste. We exchanged a firm handshake. "Call me if you need help," Levi said goodbye. "And not just in an emergency. Just call." The drive back seemed longer. I drove, absorbed in my own thoughts. Those 3 days at Levi's had made a lot of things clear to me. I saw that it was possible to age differently, to remain active, respected, needed. That age is not the problem, but how you treat it, and how you let others treat you. As I pulled up to my neighborhood, I noticed I was gripping the steering wheel too hard and forced myself to relax. "There's probably nothing wrong," I said to myself. "Just a silly old man's fears." But as I turned onto my street, I immediately realized that my fears were not in vain. There was a dumpster outside my house that hadn't been there when I left, and parked in the driveway was Warren's familiar SUV. I parked and walked to the front door. I took out my keys, put them in the lock, and found the key wouldn't turn. Tried again, no use. The lock was new. At first I couldn't believe it. Had they really done it? Changed the locks on my own house? I rang the doorbell, knocked. No one answered. I walked around the house and peered through the living room window. What I saw made me cold. My living room was almost empty. Gone were the bookshelves, the chair I liked to sit in, a few paintings from the walls. There were boxes in the center of the room, and Haley and Warren were methodically going through things, putting some in boxes, others set aside. I knocked on the window. They flinched and turned around. Something resembling guilt flashed across Haley's face, but it was quickly replaced by a determined expression. Warren went to the window and gestured for me to go to the front door. When they opened it, I had already gotten over the first shock and anger. Now I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if I were watching from the sidelines. "Dad!" Haley looked surprised. "You're home early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "Obviously," I replied dryly. "What's going on here?" "We thought we'd help you clean up a little," Warren began in that condescending tone I'd always hated. "You know it's about time you got all these—" "Why did they change the locks?" I interrupted. There was an awkward pause. Haley and Warren looked at each other. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about this when you got back," Haley began. "We found a great apartment in a new complex for active retirees. It's got everything geared toward people your age, medical care, entertainment." "You changed the locks on my house," I repeated, "without my permission." "We're worried about you," Warren interjected. "You live alone, your health is failing. What if you fall? What if you get sick? There's no one around. That's an excuse to break into my house and start throwing away my stuff?" "We're not throwing anything away," Haley objected. "We're just, sorting. What you really need will go with you to your new apartment. We'll put the rest in storage." I looked around the living room. Boxes, half-disassembled shelves, empty walls. They were already sorting through my life without asking permission. "And when were you going to tell me about this?" I asked, feeling a cold rage rising inside me. "We tried to talk to you about moving out, but you refused to listen," Haley said with a hint of accusation in her voice. "We thought it would be easier to get everything ready and then show you the new apartment. You'll see for yourself how much better it is." "And then what? Sell my house?" "We have to be practical, Dad. This house is too big for you. It needs constant maintenance. And the money from the sale will give you a comfortable old age." "And you'll make a nice profit," I added. "How can you say that?" Haley looked offended. "We're doing this for you." I gave her a long look. Did she believe what she was saying? Or had she just learned to convince herself that she was acting in good faith? "Give me the keys to the new locks," I said calmly. "Dad, let's talk first. We can show you the apartment today." "Keys," I repeated more firmly. Warren reluctantly pulled a bunch of keys out of his pocket and separated one. "Russell, you have to understand." I took the key, not listening to the continuation. My calmness must have confused them. They expected anger, screaming, perhaps even tears. But I felt only cold determination. "I want you to leave," I said. "Now." "But we're not done." "You are done," I said. "This is my house. You broke in here without permission, changed the locks, touched my stuff. Get out before I call the police." "The police?" Haley looked shocked. "Dad, you don't know what you're saying. We're your family." "That's why I'm giving you a chance to leave amicably. I expect you here tomorrow to put everything back the way it was. And don't you dare throw anything away or take anything away." They reluctantly headed for the exit, throwing me perplexed glances. At the door, Haley turned around. "Dad, we still have to talk about this. You can't just—" At that moment, my cell phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw her name on the screen. Haley, standing in front of me, heard the ringing too and looked at her phone in her hand, confused. "What the—" I answered the call and put the phone to my ear. "Dad?" Haley's voice sounded excited. "We came to your house, but you're not here. Where are you?" I silently looked at Haley standing in front of me and listened to her own voice on the phone. There was a look of understanding and something akin to fear on her face. "We changed the locks," the voice on the phone continued, "and you don't live here anymore. It's for your own good, Dad. We found you a great apartment in a nursing home where you'll be taken care of." I slowly put the phone down and looked at my daughter. "That's very brave of you," I said quietly. Something in my tone made her take a step back. Warren took her hand. "Come on, Haley. This isn't a good time to talk. Let's let your father cool off." They left, leaving me alone in the half-ruined house. I slowly walked around the rooms, assessing the damage. Many things were boxed up, some just piled in a heap. The bedroom was in chaos. They'd obviously gone through all the drawers. In the study, my laptop and several folders of documents were missing. I sat down in the chair that had somehow miraculously avoided being sorted and thought. What Haley and Warren had done wasn't just trespassing, it was treason. They'd taken advantage of my absence to break into my house, to change my life without my consent, to dispose of my property as they saw fit, all under the pretense of caring for me. I remembered Levi's words about the importance of maintaining control of my life. I remembered how respectful the people at Rainer Springs had been to him, and how different it was from the condescension Haley and Warren had treated me with. Well, it was time to show them that I wasn't a helpless old man to be manipulated. I have rights, I have dignity, and I will defend them. I pulled out my phone and found a number I'd kept for a long time but hadn't used, the number of Alan Prescott, the attorney who had once helped me with the paperwork on the house. "Mr. Prescott? It's Russell Thornley. I need your help. I've had a legal situation with my family. The Blue Pine Motel on the outskirts of Abilene never claimed to be luxurious. It was a typical roadside shelter for moderate budget travelers. Clean, functional, no frills. I took a room on the first floor, overlooking the parking lot and cracked asphalt. After checking in, I sat on the edge of the double bed and looked around. A featureless room with faded wallpaper, an outdated TV, and an air conditioner that hummed like a tractor. Nothing like the house I'd shared with Margaret for nearly half a century. I pulled a picture of my wife out of my pocket, the one I always carried with me, and set it on the nightstand. "Here we are, Margie, at the motel," I muttered. "What would you say if you saw me here?" I could almost hear her soft laugh and her reply, "I'd say you finally decided to be a little spontaneous, Russ." Smiling at the memory, I pulled out of my bag the file folder I had thoughtfully brought with me before traveling to Levi's. It contained everything I needed: the house title, will, bank statements, medical reports, and other important papers. I spread them out on the bed like solitaire cards. These documents were my insurance, my weapons in the battle ahead. I gathered them gradually, anticipating that a day like today might come. I first thought about the need to protect myself from my own children about 2 years ago. Margaret had been gone for 3 years, and I had slowly adapted to life without her. One day, Haley and Warren took me out to dinner, and afterward they made small talk about how I should simplify my finances. "Dad, it's hard for you to keep track of all the bills and payments," Haley said with that special tone she saved for when talking about my age. "We could help. Warren's good with finances." Their offer sounded tempting: a joint bank account into which I would transfer my savings and from which they could pay my bills and purchases. "That way you won't have to worry," they assured me. I almost agreed, but something stopped me. Perhaps it was the look they exchanged when I said I'd think about it, too satisfied, too calculating. Or the way Warren immediately asked exactly how much money I kept in my main account. The next day I called an old acquaintance of mine, Alan Prescott, the lawyer who had once helped Margaret and me with the paperwork on the house. Alan had already retired but was still counseling some longtime clients. We met at a coffee shop and I told him about my doubts. "Russell, I've seen this many times," he said, shaking his head. "Kids think old people can't handle their money anymore, and they take matters into their own hands, sometimes out of the best of intentions, sometimes for other reasons." "Do you think Haley's trying to trick me?" I asked, still not wanting to believe that was a possibility. "I didn't say that," Alan answered diplomatically. "But a joint bank account is a big risk. If something happens, the money could be frozen or go to her automatically, and if they have financial problems, your money can go to pay them off." He advised me to leave things as they were and instead execute a power of attorney in the event of incapacity, a document that would only take effect if I actually lost my decision-making ability. "And choose someone other than Haley to be the trustee," he added. "Appoint someone else you trust, a counterweight." I took his advice and executed the power of attorney for Haley and Levi, my old friend and co-worker. Haley was unhappy when she found out she wouldn't be the sole power of attorney, but couldn't argue against the reasonableness of that decision. After that incident, I began to watch my daughter and son-in-law's behavior more closely. I noticed how they looked at my house with appraisal, how often they talked about how people your age would be better off living in special complexes. I saw Warren examining the valuable items in my house, as if calculating how much I could get for them. 6 months ago, another incident occurred that made me take extra precautions. Haley asked me for a loan of $20,000 for Flora's education. I gave the money without hesitation. My granddaughter's education was important. But a month later, I accidentally learned from Flora herself that she had received a full scholarship and did not need additional funds for her education. When I asked Haley where the money went, she was embarrassed and started saying something about other expenses, about Flora being out of touch with the family finances. But I could see in her eyes that she was lying. After that, I started documenting every financial interaction with the kids, every loan, every gift, every request for money. I installed a call recording app on my phone and saved every message. I copied all important documents and kept them in different places. Some in my home safe, some in a safe deposit box, some at Levi's. Around the same time, I met with Alan Prescott again and signed a new will. Under the previous version, all my property was to be divided equally between Haley and my grandchildren upon my death. Now I made a change. The house and most of the money was to go directly to the grandchildren, bypassing Haley and Warren, and only after the grandchildren turned 30. Until then, the property was to be managed by a trust overseen by an independent trustee. That will protect your inheritance from hasty decisions, Alan explained, and it will give your grandchildren time to grow up before they have access to large sums of money. I also added a clause stating that any loans not repaid by the time of death should be deducted from the borrower's share. This applied to the $20,000 that Haley had borrowed ostensibly for Flora's education, as well as several other sums that she and Warren had borrowed over the past few years. These measures might have seemed excessive, even paranoid, but today's events proved that I was right in my fears. Haley and Warren didn't just want to control my finances. They wanted control of my entire life, my home, my belongings, and they didn't ask for my consent. Back to the present, I gathered the papers back into a folder and called Alan Prescott. Despite the late hour, he answered almost immediately. "Russell, what happened?" I told him what had happened: the change of locks, the audit of my belongings, the attempt to evict me to a nursing home. Alan listened in silence, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is a serious violation of the law," he said when I was done. "Trespassing, property damage, attempted eviction. Do you have proof?" I took some pictures of the trashed rooms, and I recorded our conversation when they admitted they'd changed the locks. "Oh, that's great. We can file a police report right now if you want. I've been thinking. Going to the police would mean a complete break with my daughter. Despite what she'd done, I wasn't sure I was ready to take that step." "Let's try to handle this another way first," I said. "I want to send them a formal complaint on your behalf. Give them a chance to make things right." "All right," Alan agreed. "I'll prepare the document. But you need to decide exactly what you want to demand from them." We went over the details. I wanted Haley and Warren to return all the things they'd taken out of the house, restore the rooms to their original condition, return the old locks or give me all the keys to the new ones. In addition, I demanded the return of all the sums they had borrowed within 30 days. "And one more thing," I added. "I want them to provide a written apology and an undertaking never to enter my house again without my express consent." "Those are reasonable demands," Alan approved. "I'll prepare the document and send it to you for approval in the morning. Then we'll deliver it to Haley formally, via courier." After talking to Alan, I felt somewhat relieved. I had a plan, I had support, I had proof. I wasn't defenseless in the face of my children's betrayal. In the morning, I was awakened by the phone ringing. It was Flora, my granddaughter. "Grandpa, where are you? Mommy said you went somewhere." "I'm at a motel, honey. There's been some trouble with the house." "What kind of problems?" "Mommy didn't say anything. She just said you two got in a fight because she wanted to help you clean." I grinned. Help with the cleaning was what Haley called her attempt to evict me from my own house. It's a little more complicated than that, Flora. Your parents changed the locks on my house while I was away and started packing up my stuff. What? Why? She sounded genuinely surprised. They think I should move into a nursing home, and they've decided uh, to expedite the process. Oh my God, Grandpa, I had no idea. That's terrible. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Her genuine concern touched me. At least one family member still cared about me. I'm fine, honey. Don't worry. I can come to you. Where are you staying? I gave her the address of the motel and she promised to stop by this afternoon. After talking to Flora, I felt a little better. Maybe all is not lost. Alan sent a draft of the claim by 10 in the morning. The document was couched in legal terms, strict and unambiguous. It clearly laid out the facts of the violation, my demands, and the consequences that would follow if the demands were not met, namely, a police report for trespassing and property damage, and a civil suit for damages. I approved the text, and Alan sent a courier with the document to Haley and Warren's address. Now all we had to do was wait for their reaction. Around noon there was a knock on the door of the motel room. I opened it and saw Flora, tall, slender, with a worried expression on her face, so like young Margaret. "Grandfather," she hugged me tightly. I was so worried. We sat on the edge of the bed, and I told her all the details, how Haley and Warren had gradually made it clear they wanted me to move out, how they'd changed the locks and started sorting my things, my conversation with the lawyer. "I can't believe Mom would do that," Flora shook her head. "She said she was worried about you, that it was hard for you to be alone in such a big house. But she never mentioned that she was going to change the locks." "I guess she didn't think I'd be back so soon," I said dryly. "What's going to happen now? Are you going to sue them?" "Only if they don't comply with my demands. I gave them a chance to make things right." Flora looked depressed. "I feel terrible. I should have known something was wrong. Mother has been talking so much lately about your house, about how it could be sold. It's not your fault, honey. It's not your responsibility. But I could have done something. Talk to you, warn you." I put my arm around her shoulders. "You're here now, and that's what matters. By the way, how's your internship going? It starts soon, doesn't it?" Flora perked up a little, talking about her upcoming internship at an architecture firm. It's been her passion since childhood, designing buildings, creating spaces. I always encouraged her interest, buying books on architecture, taking her on tours of Abilene's historic buildings. "You know, Grandpa," she said suddenly, "you can stay with me until all this is resolved. I have a small apartment, but I have a couch in the living room." "Thanks, honey, but I'll stay here. I don't want to drag you into a conflict with your parents." "But that's not fair. You don't have to live in a motel while they're running your house. It's only temporary. It'll be over soon." After Flora left, I was once again alone with my thoughts. Her support meant a lot to me, but I really didn't want to put her in a position where she had to choose between me and her parents. Toward evening, Alan called. "The courier delivered the document," he said. "Haley signed for it. Now we're waiting for their reaction." "Do you think they'll agree to my terms?" "It's hard to say. If they have any common sense, yes, because the alternative is a lawsuit, which they'll almost certainly lose. Trespassing is a serious charge." I thanked him and hung up. Less than a minute later, the phone rang again. This time it was Haley. "Daddy." Her voice sounded both hurt and outraged. "You hired a lawyer against your own daughter? Seriously? And you changed the locks on your own father's house? Seriously? We did it for you, to make you feel better." "No, Haley, you did it for you, to take over my house." "How can you say that?" There were tears in her voice. "After everything we've done for you. We took care of you, visited you, helped you with things. When was the last time you visited me just for fun, not to talk about selling the house or moving into a nursing home?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "We have our own lives, Dad. Work, kids, commitments. We can't be around you all the time. I didn't ask for that. All I asked for was respect, the right to decide where and how I live my life. But you don't understand. You're 76 years old. You can't decide everything for yourself. I can. I will. Now tell me, Haley, will you honor the demands of the claim? She sighed. We don't have a choice, do we? Otherwise, you're going to sue us? That's exactly right. Okay, her voice turned cold. We'll get it all back. But don't think that's the end of it, Dad. You're making a big mistake. Maybe I am, but it's my mistake and I'm entitled to it. After talking to Haley, I felt a strange emptiness. I won that round, but at what cost? The relationship with my daughter is probably irrevocably damaged. And even though it was her own fault, I was still bitter. In the evening, I couldn't sleep for a long time, tossing and turning in the uncomfortable soaker bed. My thoughts swirled around in my head like fall leaves in the wind. I remembered Haley as a little girl, how she'd run to me with open arms when I came home from work, how I taught her how to ride her bike, how proud I was of her on her college graduation day. When did everything change? When did my favorite daughter turn into someone capable of kicking me out of my own home? Maybe it was my own fault. Maybe I wasn't a good enough father. With these thoughts, I finally fell into a restless sleep. I woke up to the phone ringing. It was Alan. Good morning, Russell. I have some news. Haley contacted me through her attorney. They've agreed to fulfill all the requirements of the claim except one, repayment of the loans. They're asking for more time. How much time? They're offering 6 months instead of 30 days, and they want a repayment schedule. I've been thinking. On the one hand, I didn't need the money urgently. On the other, it was a test of their seriousness. If they really intended to repay the debt, why couldn't they do it within a month? Tell them I'll take 3 months, and I want to see the first payment in a week. Okay, I'll tell them. One more thing. They want to arrange for your stuff to be returned and the locks to be changed this afternoon. Are you planning on attending? I will. It's my house, and I want to see what they're doing. That makes sense. I'll be there too, just in case. After the conversation, I felt a surge of energy. Something was finally happening. I was finally taking back control of my life. I quickly packed up, ate breakfast at a nearby diner, and headed to my house. As I pulled up, I saw that Alan's car was already in the driveway, as well as the locksmith service van, so they were really going to change the locks back. Alan was waiting for me at the entrance, elegant even in his casual clothes with his unchanged leather briefcase in his hands. Russell, he shook my hand firmly. Haley and her husband hadn't arrived yet, but the locksmith was already working on the locks. Indeed, a young man in uniform overalls was working on the front door lock. How are you feeling? Alan asked, looking at me carefully. Strange, I answered honestly. Like I was back in someone else's house. It'll pass. The important thing is that the truth is on your side. Soon Haley's car pulled up. She got out, followed by Warren. Both of them looked tense and avoided looking me in the eye. Dad, Haley nodded dryly. Mr. Prescott. Miss Thornley. Mr. Kincaid, Alan replied just as formally. I'm glad we were able to reach an agreement without going to court. Yes, said Warren. Very glad. The locksmith finished with the locks and handed me 2 sets of keys. All done, sir. The locks are the same as before. We found them in the garage. I thanked him and paid, though the agreement was that Haley and Warren would cover that expense. I didn't feel like arguing about petty things. We walked into the house. The inside was already much more organized than the last time I'd seen it. Furniture had been put back in its place. Books had been put back on the shelves, but it still felt like someone else's house. Things were not quite the way I was used to them. Books were out of order. Where are the things you took out? I asked. In the garage, Haley answered. We didn't throw anything out like you asked. Good. I'll check back later. Alan pulled a document out of his briefcase. This is the agreement we discussed. It sets out all the terms, including repayment of the loans within 3 months. Please read it carefully and sign it if you agree. Haley took the document and began to read, handing each page she read to Warren. Her face grew increasingly grim. "It says here that we recognize trespassing," she said finally. "That's not true. We had a key." "A key you used without the homeowner's permission," Alan replied calmly. "It's still trespassing. And it shows a loan of $20,000, which I supposedly borrowed for Flora's education, but that money was a gift." "No, Haley," I interjected. "You asked to borrow it, specifically to pay for Flora's tuition. And I can prove it. I have a tape of our conversation." She went pale. "You recorded our conversations? Your own daughter?" "Only after I realized I couldn't trust you." There was a heavy pause. Haley and Warren looked at each other, as if in silent consultation. "Okay," Haley said finally. "We'll sign it. But know this, Dad. You ruined our family. I hope you're happy." "No, Haley," I said quietly. "I'm not happy. I'm deeply saddened, but I didn't destroy our family. You did when you decided that my desires, my dignity, my rights were worthless." They signed the document without further objection. Alan made copies for all parties and tucked the original into his briefcase. "As for the payment schedule," he said, "the first payment of $2,000 is due in 1 week. The requisites are in the agreement." Haley nodded without looking at me. "Can we go now?" Warren asked. "Or are there any more humiliations we have to endure?" "You are free to go," said Alan, "but remember your obligations." They left without saying goodbye. I heard their car door slam, the engine roar louder than necessary. Then there was silence. "There," Alan said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Phase 1 is complete. You're home again." Haley Kincaid sat at the kitchen table, staring at the official letter the courier had just delivered. Her hands trembled slightly, and her face was frozen with an expression of disbelief bordering on indignation. The sun was beating in through the windows of the new Scandinavian-style kitchen, highlighting every wrinkle in her face, wrinkles that had become more frequent in recent years. "I can't believe it," she muttered, rereading the letter for the 3rd time. "I just can't believe he did it." Warren, her husband, came into the kitchen with a cup of coffee and immediately noticed her condition. "What's wrong?" he asked, coming closer. Haley silently held out the letter to him. Warren ran his eyes over the first page and his face darkened. "God damn it," he cursed. "He filed a formal complaint against us? Through a lawyer?" "Read all the way through," Haley said grimly. "He wants all the stuff we took out, the locks restored, and all the loans paid back within 30 days. All the loans, Warren. That's almost $40,000. We don't have that kind of money right now." Warren ran a hand through his hair, visibly nervous. "Not after buying a new car and fixing it up." "I know." Haley stood up abruptly and began to pace the kitchen. "And that's not all. He's threatening to sue us for trespassing and property damage if we don't comply." "Sue Warren against his own daughter." "He's bluffing," Warren said uncertainly. "He's not really going to—" "Have you seen this letter?" Haley interrupted him. "It's from Alan Prescott. He's not some cheap lawyer, he's one of the best lawyers in Abilene. Dad wouldn't hire him just to make a threat." She sank back into her chair, suddenly feeling weak. "I don't understand," she said more quietly. "We wanted what was best for him. He can't live alone in this huge house. He can't cope anymore. We tried to talk to him nicely, but he wouldn't listen. What were we supposed to do?" "Maybe we shouldn't have changed the locks," Warren said uncertainly. "It was a little drastic." "What, wait for him to fall down the stairs or forget to turn off the gas?" Haley snapped at him. "He's 76 years old. He can't make rational decisions anymore." "According to this letter, he can," Warren said, looking at the document again. "And very well." At that moment, the front door slammed and Elliot, their son, entered the kitchen, a tall young man with a perpetually tired look and headphones around his neck. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing his parents' tense faces. "You look like someone died." Your grandfather filed a formal complaint against us through an attorney, Haley replied, because we changed the locks on his house. You did what? Elliot looked genuinely shocked. Without his permission? We did it for him, Haley defended herself. You know the state of the house, and Grandpa can't do it on his own anymore. We found him a great place in Cedar Hills, with round-the-clock care, socialization, all the amenities. But it's his home, Elliot shook his head. You can't just kick him out. We didn't. Haley was indignant. We were helping him make the right decision. By changing the locks while he was gone, Elliot said skeptically. I don't know, Mom. If someone changed the locks in my apartment without my permission, I'd go to a lawyer too. This is different. You're young, you're independent, and Grandpa, he can't live alone anymore. Why do you say that? Elliot objected. I was at his place a month ago, helping him set up a new router. He's perfectly sane, cooks his own meals, takes care of himself. Yes, the house needs repairs, but that doesn't mean Grandpa needs to be evicted. Haley looked at her son in bewilderment. She hadn't expected him to take his grandfather's side. That's easy for you to say, she said bitterly. You're not the one who's going to deal with him if something happens to him. You're not the one who's going to go to him at the first call if he gets sick. Do you? Elliot asked bluntly. When was the last time you visited your grandfather just for fun, not to discuss selling the house? Haley opened her mouth to object, but couldn't find the words. Warren hurried to intervene. Look, son, the situation is more complicated than it seems. Your grandfather owns valuable real estate that requires constant maintenance. Sooner or later, he's going to have to move. We were just trying to ease the transition. And sell the house quickly while the market is high, Elliot added with a hint of sarcasm. Don't say that. Haley was outraged. We were doing it for Dad. Sure, Mom. Elliot grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator. Well, good luck with the lawyer. I take it Grandpa's somewhere else now? At the Blue Pine Motel, Haley replied grudgingly. Or at Flora's. She went to see him yesterday. She did? Flora knows? Elliot shook his head. Okay, I'm going to go call my grandfather, see how he's doing. Don't you dare take his side, Haley shouted after her son. He's manipulating you. Warren put his hand on her shoulder. Calm down, honey. We need to figure out what to do about this claim. We don't have many options. Haley took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. We need our own lawyer, she finally said. I'll call Greg Summers. He does family law. The next day, Haley and Warren met with Greg Summers, a family law attorney, at his small office in downtown Abilene. Summers, a full middle-aged man with balding hair and a good-natured face, scrutinized the claim from Alan Prescott. Yeah, he said finally, setting the document aside. The situation is not in your favor, frankly. Why? Haley was indignant. We were doing this for my father's benefit. He's an elderly man living alone in a big house that needs care. But legally, Summers interrupted her, you did commit trespassing. You entered the house without the owner's permission, changed the locks, touched his things. Those are serious offenses. But I'm his daughter, Haley exclaimed. I have a right to worry about him. Worry about him, yes, Summers nodded, but not to break the law. If your father is competent and judging from the fact that he hired Alan Prescott to prepare this claim, he is, then he's the only one who has the right to dispose of his property. What are we supposed to do? Warren asked. Just comply with all his demands? That's what I would recommend, Summers said seriously. If it goes to trial, you'll almost certainly lose. And then, in addition to complying with all the demands, you'll have to pay court costs and, perhaps, compensation for moral damages. What about the debt? Haley asked. He demands $40,000 within 30 days. We don't have that kind of money. We can try to negotiate on that point, Summers said. Offer a payment schedule, a bond, something like that. But I would recommend that the basic requirements, return the items, restore the locks, be met immediately. After the meeting with the lawyer, Haley was distraught. She really hadn't expected the situation to turn against them. In her mind, they were doing the right thing by taking care of an elderly father who could no longer take care of himself. That evening, Haley organized a family council. Gathered in their living room were she, Warren, Elliot, and Flora, who arrived reluctantly and immediately took a defensive stance. "I will not be part of the conspiracy against grandfather," she declared, crossing her arms over her chest. "There's no conspiracy," Haley sighed. "We just want to discuss the situation as a family." "As a family?" Flora snorted. "Where's Grandpa then? Is he part of the family too, or have you already written him off?" "Flora, please," Haley said tiredly. "We're trying to find a solution that's best for everyone." "The best for everyone is to give Grandpa his house back and apologize," Flora cut her off. "We'll get the house back," Warren intervened. "The question is, what to do next? Your grandfather can't live there forever." "Why not?" Flora objected. "He's doing fine." "He's not doing fine," Haley shook her head. "The house needs repairs, the garden is neglected, and he's not old enough to maintain it all." "So help him," Flora exclaimed. "Hire a gardener, organize the repairs. If his welfare is so important to you, help him stay in the house, not try to evict him." There was a pause. The thought didn't seem to have occurred to either Haley or Warren. "It would be expensive," Warren said uncertainly. "Regular garden maintenance, roof repairs, porch repairs." "But it will be cheaper than the $40,000 you owe," said Elliot, who had been silent until then. "And certainly better than the legal fees if your grandfather sued you." That night, they decided to honor Russell's demands and try to negotiate a repayment schedule. Haley also called several mutual acquaintances, including Dorothy Wilkins, a former co-worker of her father's, and asked them to talk to her father to convince him to compromise. But Russell proved adamant. Dorothy called Haley the next day and said she had spoken to him, but he was adamant. "He's very hurt, Haley," Dorothy said. "He feels that you've betrayed his trust, and frankly, I can understand it. Changing the locks on someone else's house without permission is a strong move." "We meant well," Haley said for the umpteenth time. "I know, honey. But sometimes our ideas of what's best don't match up with other people's. Your father has always been an independent man. He wants to keep that independence until the end." After talking to Dorothy, Haley realized that they would have to accept her father's terms. She and Warren contacted Russell's attorney and agreed to meet all of his demands, asking only for more time to repay the debt. To their surprise, Russell agreed to an installment plan, but with the condition that the first payment be made immediately. They had to sell Warren's boat and take out a loan to raise the required amount. On the day they had to return the belongings and change the locks, Haley was nervous. She hadn't seen her father since the confrontation and didn't know what to expect. When they pulled up to Russell's house, she saw his lawyer, Alan Prescott's car, already parked out front. Russell was waiting for them at the front door, straight and unwavering despite his 76 years. Standing beside him was Alan Prescott, elegant in his expensive suit. "Dad," Haley began, approaching him. "Let's get down to business first," Russell interrupted her. "The locksmith's here and he'll change the locks, and you can start returning the things you took." His tone was businesslike, without warmth or forgiveness. Haley felt her heart clench with pain. Could their relationship never be repaired again? The next few hours passed in tense silence. They set things up under Russell's supervision, who pointed out where things should stand. The locksmith replaced the locks and handed Russell new keys. When everything was finished, Haley decided to talk to her father one more time. "Dad, I want to apologize. We really went too far. I was wrong." Russell looked at her with a long, assessing stare. "Are you apologizing because you're really sorry or because I filed a formal complaint against you?" he asked finally. Haley stammered. His question hit the mark. "Both," she answered honestly. "I really meant well, Dad. I'm worried about you. But the way we chose was wrong, I realized that. Russell nodded. I accept your apology, Haley. But trust isn't as easy to rebuild as the locks on a door. I know, she said quietly, but I'd like to try. We all would. We'll see, Russell replied, not promising anything concrete. Now, if you're done with your things, I'd like to rest. The last few days have been exhausting. Haley nodded and headed for the exit, Warren following her. At the door, she turned around. Daddy, I was wondering if Flora and Elliot could come visit you. They're very worried. Of course, Russell answered. They're always welcome in my house. That answer gave Haley a tiny bit of hope. Perhaps, in time, her father would soften toward her. But for now, she had to accept his decision and respect his choice, no matter how hard it was. The morning was clear and cool. I sat on the veranda of my house, sipping coffee and watching the first rays of sunlight color the sky a soft pink. It was a strange feeling to be back in my own home after everything that had happened, like being back in a familiar place, but something subtly different. Maybe it was me. It had been a week since Haley and Warren had given me my keys back and put my things back where they belonged. A week of silence and reflection. They hadn't called, they hadn't come over. Only Flora stopped by a couple times, bringing fresh baked goods and telling me about her internship. And Elliot called once, asking if I needed help with the computer. I was grateful for my grandchildren's support, but deep down I knew that sooner or later Haley would try again. She was stubborn, just like Margaret used to say, and she wouldn't give up her plan so easily, especially now that I demanded the money back. The ringing of the phone interrupted my musings. Alan Prescott's name popped up on the screen. Good morning, Russell. Alan's voice was as cheerful as ever. How are you feeling? Not bad, thanks. Any news? Yeah. Haley contacted me through her lawyer. They want to set up a meeting. Family council, as they call it. I chuckled. Family council. It sounded too formal for family. Why? The terms of the agreement are clear. They pay back the debt on schedule. I live in my house. What's there to discuss? According to them, they want to mend the relationship and to discuss long-term care plans for you. I felt a wave of irritation rising inside me again. They still didn't understand what the problem was. I don't need care, I said firmly. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I know, Russell, Alan said softly. But maybe you should listen to them. After all, they're your family. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just give up, to put an end to this relationship. But the other part, the part that remembered Haley as a little girl running toward me after work, wanted to give her another chance. Okay, I said finally, but the meeting will be here, at my house, and I want you to be there. Of course, Alan agreed. I'll tell them your terms. After talking to Alan, I spent some time thinking about the upcoming meeting. What did I want to get out of it? What did I expect? An admission of wrongdoing from Haley and Warren? A sincere reconciliation? Or just a formal agreement that they would no longer interfere in my life? I decided to prepare thoroughly. I pulled out all the documents relating to the loans I'd made to Haley and Warren over the years. I revised my will, the old version, the one that gave Haley half of my estate and the other half to my grandchildren. Prepared a draft of a new will where only Flora and Elliot became the primary heirs. It was painful to think that my relationship with my daughter had reached that point. But I couldn't let her take control of my life, my property, my dignity. If she didn't respect me in my lifetime, why on earth should I leave her an inheritance? The meeting was set for Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I prepared myself carefully. I cleaned the house, made coffee and cookies, put on my best casual suit, not out of a desire to impress, but out of self-respect. I wanted to meet them not as a helpless old man, but as the master of the house, the man in control. Alan arrived first, half an hour before the appointed time. He was in his usual impeccable suit with his usual leather briefcase. "Are you ready?" he asked, shaking my hand. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. We sat down in the living room and I went over once more the main points I wanted to discuss. Alan listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions or suggesting alternative wording. He was an excellent lawyer, attentive to detail but always mindful of the human aspect of the situation. At exactly 2 o'clock, 2 cars pulled into the driveway, Haley and Warren's sedan and Elliot's older Honda. I didn't expect the grandkids to arrive either, but I guess I was glad they did. They could be a buffer of sorts between me and Haley and Warren. I opened the door and let them in. Haley looked tense, but tried to smile. Warren, as always, held himself with ostentatious confidence. Elliot nodded at me with a slight smile, and Flora hugged me tightly. "Come on in," I said, pointing to the living room. I'd made coffee. They settled in, Haley and Warren on the couch, Flora and Elliot in the chairs. Alan took the seat next to me across from them. I poured coffee into cups, offered cookies. Ordinary actions that somehow seemed unnatural in the situation. "So," I began, once everyone was settled, "you wanted to talk." Haley cleared her throat. "Yeah, Dad, I wanted to apologize again. What we did with the locks was wrong. We went too far." I nodded, accepting the apology but not commenting on it. "But we're still worried about you," she continued. "You live alone in a big house that requires constant care. We wanted to offer help, real help, not what happened." "What kind of help?" I asked. "We could hire a gardener," Warren suggested, "and help with the roof and porch repairs. Elliot could check your appliances regularly, and Flora could come by more often, and Haley and I could too." I looked at them carefully. The offer sounded tempting, but I couldn't help but wonder what was behind it. "And in return?" I asked bluntly. Haley looked puzzled. "In return? Dad, we're not asking for anything in return. We just want to help." "Like when you helped me by changing the locks?" I couldn't help but be sarcastic. "No, not like that," Haley blushed. "We realized our mistake. We'll respect your decisions, your independence." I wondered. Maybe they had really learned their lesson. Maybe I should have given them another chance. "I appreciate your offer," I said finally. "But before we discuss it, I want to make a few things clear." I pulled out the file I'd prepared. "Over the past 5 years, you've borrowed a total of $42,000 from me. Money for a new car, for home repairs, for Warren's business project that somehow failed, for Flora's education, which, as it turned out, was paid for by a scholarship. None of these loans have been repaid." Haley and Warren looked at each other. It was obvious they hadn't expected to start the conversation this way. "Dad, we agreed on a repayment schedule," Haley started. "Yes, and I appreciate you making the first payment." I nodded. "But I want you to understand that these aren't gifts, they're loans. Money you borrowed, promised to pay back, and haven't paid back." "We will," Warren said firmly. "Every penny." "Good." I put the loan folder aside and pulled out another. "Now for the second thing, my will." I noticed Haley tense up. Warren stepped forward too. "Under my current will, made while Margaret was still alive, Haley gets half of my estate, including the house. The other half is divided between Flora and Elliot, but I decided to change those terms. I opened the folder and pulled out a draft of a new will. Under the new will, Flora and Elliot will be the primary heirs. They will get the house and most of my estate. Haley will receive a token amount of $1,000. There was silence in the room. Haley turned pale. Warren looked shocked. Flora and Elliot looked at me with surprise and some embarrassment. "Daddy, you can't be serious," Haley began. "I can," I said firmly. "And here's why. For the last few years, you and Warren haven't looked at me as a father, but as an obstacle to you getting my house and money. You rarely visited me for nothing with no ulterior motive. You took no interest in my life, in my desires. You saw me only as an old man occupying valuable real estate and hoarding money that you could spend." "That's not true," Haley exclaimed. but there was no conviction in her voice. "It's not true?" I looked her straight in the eye. "When was the last time you came to me just to talk? Ask how I'm feeling, what I'm interested in, what I'm doing. When was the last time you took me out to a family dinner, not because it was a birthday or a holiday, but just for fun?" Haley remained silent. She knew the answer as well as I did. It hadn't happened in years. "I've known about your plans for a long time," I continued. "I've seen you looking at my house with an appraising eye. I've heard you talk about how at his age you'd rather live in a nursing home. I've seen you examining my things as if you were figuring out how much you could get for them." I turned to Flora and Elliot. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable about any of this. You're not to blame for your parents' actions, and I'm not using you as an instrument of revenge. I truly believe you deserve an inheritance more than they do. You at least visited your old grandfather once in a while just for fun, not for selfish purposes." Flora looked upset. "Grandfather, we don't want to be the cause of discord in the family." "You are not the cause," I interrupted her gently. "The reason is your parents' attitude toward me, their disrespect, their selfishness, their impatience." Warren, who had been silent until then, suddenly exploded. "It is unjust," he exclaimed. "We have cared for you for years. Yes, maybe not visited as often as you wanted, but we have our own lives, our own obligations. And yes, we wanted you to move to a place where you'd be better cared for. But not because we covet your home, but because we're worried about you." "If you were really concerned about me," I replied calmly, "you would ask what I want. You would have respected my wishes, my choices. But you thought you knew better, that you could control my life, my possessions, my future." I paused to take a sip of coffee. Strangely, I felt surprisingly calm. It was as if all those words had been waiting to be said for a long time, and now that they were spoken, I felt relieved. "I haven't signed this new will yet," I said, pointing to the documents. "I'm giving you one last chance. If you really want to get along, if you're willing to respect me and my decisions, I won't change the will. But if you continue to treat me like a burden, if you continue to try to control my life, I will sign these documents tomorrow." There was silence in the room again. Haley looked at me with an expression that was hard to decipher, a mixture of resentment, fear, maybe even understanding. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair, "you wanted to talk about help. Let's discuss it. But on my terms." "What terms?" Haley asked quietly. "First of all, this is my house, and I'm staying in it until I decide otherwise. No talk of nursing homes or special facilities or anything like that. Second, if you want to help with gardening, repairs, appliances, please, I'd appreciate it. But it has to be real help, not an attempt to control my life. Third, all loans must be paid back on schedule, no late fees or excuses." I looked at each of them in turn. "And most importantly, respect. I will not tolerate condescending attitudes, patting me on the shoulder, talking about how, at my age, something can't or shouldn't be done. I have lived a long life, built a successful career, raised a daughter, helped raise my grandchildren. I deserve respect, not pity or impatience." There was a long pause after my speech. Alan, who had been silent all this time, nodded approvingly at me. Flora looked at me with obvious admiration. Elliot seemed thoughtful. Haley and Warren looked shocked. They clearly hadn't expected such a rebuff. "Daddy," Haley finally said, and her voice sounded unaccustomedly uncertain, "I didn't know you felt so acute. I thought we really cared about you." "Maybe in your mind that was caring," I replied, "but not in mine. Caring is respecting a person's wishes even if they don't coincide with yours. It's supporting his choices, not imposing your own." Warren opened his mouth as if to object, but then closed it without a word. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was really listening. "We could try something else," Haley said uncertainly. If you really want to stay in this house, we can help make it more comfortable and safe for you. And we'll pay back all the debts, Warren added. Every dime. I looked at them carefully, trying to see if they were sincere or if they were just scared of losing their inheritance. It was hard to tell for sure, but at least they were really listening to me for the first time in a long time. All right, I said at last. Let's give it a try. But remember, this is the last chance. I will not tolerate any more attempts to control my life. After these words, the atmosphere in the room lightened a little. We began to discuss specific issues: porch repairs, garden maintenance, regular visits. Alan helped to formulate agreements clearly and concisely to avoid misunderstandings in the future. When the major issues were settled, Haley and Warren got ready to leave. They had the tense look of people who had learned a serious lesson and were trying to make sense of it. Flora and Elliot decided to stay a little longer. At the door, Haley turned around. "Daddy, I really didn't realize how much we hurt you. I'm sorry." "I know," I replied. "Maybe now we can build a new relationship, one based on mutual respect." She nodded and walked out, Warren following her. I closed the door and returned to the living room where Alan, Flora, and Elliot were waiting for me. "Well, that was intense," Elliot said with a slight smile. "I apologize for dragging you into this," I said to my grandchildren. "You shouldn't have picked sides in the conflict between me and your parents." "It's okay, Grandpa," Flora said, sitting down next to me. "I'm proud of you. You stood up for your rights, for your dignity." "Yes, it was impressive," Elliot agreed. "I don't think my parents have ever seen you so determined." "Do you think they learned their lesson?" I asked. Elliot shrugged. "It's hard to say, but at least they realize that you're not a helpless old man you can do anything with." Alan, who was gathering his papers, nodded. "You did a great job, Russell. Clear, to the point, unemotional. I'm proud of you." After they left, I sat on the veranda for a long time watching the sunset. A strange feeling came over me, a mixture of sadness and release. Sadness that my relationship with my daughter had gotten to the point where it required the intervention of lawyers and threats of disinheritance. Liberation from finally saying everything I'd been holding in for so long and standing up for my right to live the life I wanted. I didn't know if anything would change after today's conversation. Would Haley start treating me with more respect? Would Warren stop looking at my house as a future prophet? Will they start to see me as a person and not just an old man occupying valuable real estate? Time will tell. With that thought, I finished my coffee and went back inside. Tomorrow would be a new day.